Hello and welcome. This is the stamping technique video on ink smooshing. The basic supplies that you really need for this are some kind of cardstock. We'll talk more in detail about that as we start. Ink and some water. There are other supplies that I do highly recommend, so I'll be pulling those in as we get going. You can make note of that so that as you start to play with this technique, you can have some of those things on hand that will make you maybe feel a little bit more successful with this. So let's go ahead and get started with the technique. So what is ink smooshing? Ink smooshing is a method of getting ink onto your paper or cardstock by either blotting your paper into wet ink or taking a tool of some sort and blotting the ink onto your cardstock. So I'm going to show you both of those different methods and a couple different little tools that you can use to do that. Now, as far as cardstock, I highly recommend that you either use watercolor paper like this. I'll show another piece up close. So watercolor paper usually has a little bit of texture. This is a nice smooth one from Stampin' Up. But watercolor paper is especially formulated and created to be able to handle a lot of water without pilling and peeling up like regular cardstock would do. You could also use a mixed media paper, and I have a couple different brands that I really like. You can look on like scrapbook.com or some of those other websites, but they have their own brand. That's what this is. I've cut it down to a half sheet. So mixed media paper and watercolor paper both are manufactured and created in a way that they can take a lot of water, a lot of this kind of mixed media stuff that we're going to do, and it might warp just a little bit, but it's not going to pill and peel like regular cardstock would. I also recommend having some kind of a surface that you can put your inks out onto and add water. So you're going to need some water, whether you have a spray bottle or like a cup of water with a paintbrush that you can kind of swirl into your ink. Either way works. I like a spray bottle. So you can either use like a mixed media mat that's specially created with a surface that, wipes off easily. It'll let your ink sit on top of it while you work with them. If you don't have that, you could also grab an acrylic block, something like that has a nice smooth surface. You can smoosh your ink right onto this directly from the ink pad, smoosh it on there, add your water and do your technique. So that's an option if you don't have this. Another option is, now this is one of the methods we're going to do, but if you take some plastic from packaging, this was just, I think some embellishments came in this package and I just cut a little sheet of it. This is one of the methods I'm going to show you, but you can also wipe your ink right onto this and add the water and do your techniques with it. So you do have some options. I think, pretty much everybody could find some plastic packaging or acetate in their house if they don't have something like this or an acrylic block. And it doesn't have to be a big acrylic block like this. I just grabbed that for an example. Now, like I said, one way to do this is to use a piece of plastic or acetate that you can put the ink on and then smoosh it onto your cardstock. Another way that I saw was if you take a rag, like a nice little microfiber cloth, put it inside a Ziploc bag, and then you can kind of ball it up like this to pick up your ink and dab it onto your paper. I saw this online. I think it's Two Scrapbook Friends on YouTube and Facebook. They have a scrapbooking store in Canada. So check out their channel. It was on one of their YouTube channels that I saw them doing this. And I thought, oh, that's kind of neat. I'm going to try that out. It is a nice way to keep your fingers clean and kind of control where your ink is going. So there's a bunch of tips and tricks for you. So let's get started with actually doing the technique. So I am going to recreate this color palette for you, not the stamping on top. We'll talk about that later, but I started with some Bubble Bath and then added Pool Party and a little bit of Pretty Peacock. So we're going to do this color combo. So we're starting with Bubble Bath, and what I'm going to do on my surface, so whether you're doing it on a surface like this or on your acrylic block, and actually I'm going to do it on both. I'm going to put a little bit on my little piece of plastic. I just smoosh a little bit there. I'm also going to smoosh a little bit here on my mat because I want to show you both ways. Okay, and then I'm going to add just a little water. Now you can add or as much or as little as you want. I like to just kind of see it start to bubble up a little bit. I think, you know, if you put a lot of water on it, you're going to get just a really, you know, kind of a wide wash of color all over your paper. If you do not quite as much water, you're going to get more splotchy looking. So just play with it and see what you like. See kind of, you know, how it ends up. I'm going to take my mixed media paper today, and that's what I'm going to play with. So from here, you can take your paper and either dab it into the ink, or you can take your plastic, oops, let's get in the picture here, and dab that directly onto your cardstock. Okay, now at this point you really want to let this dry in between layers, and that's one thing I didn't mention right at the beginning. For another tool that you might want to have handy is some kind of a drying tool for this. So either you should let it sit and dry, otherwise all your inks are going to mix together, unless this is your only ink color you're using, but you're going to get the best results if you let it dry in between. So I'm going to be using this Ranger Heated Craft Tool. You can also use an embossing gun. Just be very, very careful when you use those that you don't burn your paper. Really keep that embossing gun moving. Keep it far away from your paper. You can heat both the front and the back of this with this heat tool, and I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that, but I like to use this when I'm drawing things, you know, the mixed media type things. This will not overheat. It will not burn your paper. You can get as close to it as you want and hold it in place if you want, and it's not going to do any damage. So I'm going to just get this turned on, do a quick swipe over it to get all this dried, and then we'll come back and do another layer. Okay, and I didn't do anything with the ink that was already here, so I'm going to take my dry piece of this mixed media paper and dab it back in to some of this ink that's here. And that just starts to build some of those layers. You can start to see an extra layer of texture on there. I'm going to see if I have any left on here. I don't think I really do, but maybe just a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and dry it again. Okay, so I dried it the rest of the way, and you can see that that added just a little bit more texture. So the more you play with it, you'll see the textures and colors really start to build. And then you can just, you know, you can stay with just one color if you want, or you can start adding additional colors. So let's do that now. Let's add more color. I am just going to take a rag and I mean, depending on how much ink you have, you may want to kind of wet this down and really get it wiped off well. So let's do a little bit of Pool Party next. And again, I'm going to put my color right on here. Let's see. And I'm going to use that other little, the rag inside this bag, just so that you can see how that works. Add a little water. You can take your finger or a paintbrush or something and kind of like swirl that around in this to mix the water in. You don't have to, but if you want to do that, you can. And then I'm just going to take this, kind of wad it up a little bit, take a little bit of that and just kind of start dabbing it on, turning my hand to get the different textures. I'm going to try not to overlap the pink too much. I want to overlap a little, you know, to add those layers. I'm going to stop right there and dry it again. All right, it's really reminding me kind of cotton candy at this point, that really light pink and light blue. It's really pretty. So now I'm going to take what's left here and I'm going to dab this in it again, just kind of for a little bit of added texture on there. And dry again. Okay, and then the last thing we'll do, I'm going to add just a little bit of this pretty peacock just so you can see how nice and dark that is. I'm not going to do very much because it is such a strong color. And you know what? I think I'll pick it up with my plastic this time, just again for another little different technique to show you. stop there. All right, and I'm going to stop there, but I think that gives you a pretty good example of kind of what you can do with this ink smooshing. You know, there's various ways you can get the ink onto your paper. You can use a variety of colors as long as you dry in between each layer. That's the really important part there. And just kind of keep building and playing. And, you know, if you get to a point where you don't like it anymore because you've done too much, sometimes you can kind of keep going and get it back to something you like. And if you don't, just remember it's paper. You can always start over and play some more, and that's kind of how you learn you know, what the different inks are going to do and how your paper's going to react. Okay, so once you get your ink smooshing done, what are some things that you can actually do with it? I have 4 different ideas of ways that you might want to use this in your paper crafting. One of them is to stamp an image like I did this hydrangea, and then pick up your colors with a piece of plastic or that little baggie like I was using, and dab your colors onto that stamped image. So stamp an image and basically color it in with the ink smooshing. Another way is to ink your background, and this is the same colors that I demonstrated today. Ink your entire background and then stamp your image onto it. Another example is to use it as your background, and this background is kind of the same as this one here, except I left off that coastal cabana. This one I just used the lemon lolly and lemon lime twist and gave a fun little background for my taco fiesta characters. And then the last idea is to create your create your background and then stamp your images on it and die cut them out. And this is a little bit similar to this one, but I was also thinking I don't have an example of it, but I was also thinking you could use like a branch, like a leafy die cut like this, you know, ink up like a sheet with greens and yellows and things like that, and then die cut the whole thing out with your leaves. And then have that be, you know, lay that down as your background or your accent. So just gives you a few different ideas of ways that you can use ink smooshing in your paper crafting. I hope this video helped you learn a little bit more about ink smooshing and that you'll give it a try. If you do, I would love to see what you're working on. Please share it on your social media and tag me at Leah Faye Handmade. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you being here, and have a great rest of your day.